of the far future. Life in the 41st millennium is hard. Ruled by the Emperor of Mankind from his golden throne on Terra, humans have spread across the galaxy.
Can you hear that, Sean?
Of planets. They have achieved so much, from space travel to robotics, and yet billions live in fear. The universe seems a dangerous place, teeming with alien horrors and dark powers. But it is also a place bristling with adventure and wonder, where battles are won and heroes are forged. Chapter 1. Intruders. Zelia Lore awoke to the sound of buzzing in her cabin.
Yeah, you can hear it.
She groaned. What time was it? Her bunk creaked as she turned over, pulling her thick woolen blanket with her. Surely that couldn't be the alarm already. The shrill drone continued, flitting to and fro near the ceiling. Zelia pulled the blanket over her head, but the noise persisted. Throwing back the covers, she peered up into the gloom. That was no alarm. There was something up there, darting back and forth. Hello? Zelia called out, her voice croaking from lack of sleep. She'd been up late last night, helping her mum catalogue artifacts in the ship's cargo bay. A series of high-pitched chirps and whistles came from somewhere near the ceiling. Zelia reached out, feeling for the illuminator switch next to her bunk. Glow globes flickered into life, the tiny invader squealing in surprise as it was bathed in sudden light. Zelia frowned as her eyes focused on her flighty visitor. It was a servo sprite, one of the small winged robots that her mother used on board their planet hopper, the Scriptor.
A servo sprite.
The whimsical little things had been created by her mother's assistant, Meki. They had tiny bronze bodies and spindly limbs with probes and data connectors for fingers and toes. Their heads were long, with wide optical beads for eyes that gave the little automata a constant look of surprise. Mesh wings whirred on the robot's back, producing the strident buzz that had woken Zelia. "What are you doing up there?" Zelia asked, rubbing sleep from her eyes. The servo sprite chattered nervously at itself. If Zelia didn't know better, she would have thought that the thing was agitated. But like all the robots her mother used on their expeditions, servo sprites were just machines. Elise Lore was an explorator, a scholar who travelled the length and breadth of the Imperium excavating technology from years gone by, and who often dreamed of digging up artifacts from the dark age of technology. That period thousands of years ago when machines thought for themselves. Those days were long gone. Like so many things in the 41st millennium, artificial intelligence was a heresy, prohibited by order of the Eternal Emperor himself. While Meki's creations sometimes acted as if they were alive, they were just following their programming. They were tools, nothing more. However, something must have spooked the little automaton for it to squeeze through the gap beneath her cabin door. Goose flesh crawled over Zelia's skin. Why would a servo sprite hide? Something was wrong. Swinging her legs off the bunk, Zelia gasped as her bare feet touched the cold metal deck. The floors of the Scriptor were supposed to be heated, but like most of the systems on the ramshackle spaceship, the heating hadn't worked properly for months. The planet hopper was old, very old, and its systems often failed faster than Meki could fix them. But for all its glitches, the Scriptor had been Zelia's home since she was born. She knew every creak of the hull, every bleep of the central cogitator. The low thrum of the engines lulled her to sleep every night. They were a comfort, especially during long journeys across the Imperium, rocketing from one dig to another. It was an odd, topsy-turvy life, helping her mum uncover crashed spaceships or ancient machines on distant worlds all across the galaxy. But Zelia wouldn't have it any other way. But now, the Scriptor didn't feel comforting. It felt uneasy, and Zelia had no idea why. Pulling on her jacket and bandolier, Zelia tapped the Vox stitched into her sleeve. The communicator beeped, opening a channel to the flight deck. "Mum, are you there?" There was no reply. Neither from Mum, nor Lex Mechanic Erasmus, her
Oops.
mother's archaeological partner and an expert in galactic
I didn't
languages,
do his
both
speech.
ancient and alien. There was no point trying to contact Meki. Her mum's young assistant was a whiz with technology, but hardly ever spoke to Zelia, even though they were around the same age. At 12, she was a full year older than Meki was, but they were largely strangers, the Martian boy preferring the company of his machines. Zelia didn't mind. If she was honest, Meki made her a little uncomfortable. He was so intense, with his pale skin and cold grey eyes. Still, he would know what to do with a flustered servo sprite. The robot bumbled around her head as she opened the cabin door. She swatted it away, but it stayed close as she stepped out into the corridor. The passageway was quiet, electro candles spluttering along the creaky wall. The door to her mum's cabin was ajar, and Zelia could see it was empty. For a woman who spent her life cataloguing artifacts, Elise Law was incredibly untidy. Curios from her travels were crammed into nooks and crannies, while towers of textbooks and battered data slates teetered on every available surface. Elise's library was spread throughout the ship, piled high along the narrow gantries. How Mum ever found anything was a mystery, and yet she always seemed to be able to put her finger on any text at a moment's notice. But where was she now? Zelia crept down the corridor, checking Erasmus's cabin, but the elderly scholar was nowhere to be seen. He wasn't in his room or on the mess deck where the Scriptor's crew gathered to eat. Zelia checked the chrono display on her Vox. It was early, barely sunrise. Had Mum and Erasmus gone to the dig already? Zelia jumped at a noise from the back of the ship. Something heavy had been dropped, the deep clang echoing around the planet hopper. That had to have come from the cargo bay, where Elise stored their most valuable discoveries. They had been on this planet, a remote hive world called Targian, for 3 months now, and the hold was brimming with ancient tech. Of course, the noise could just have been Meki checking through the previous day's finds, but somehow she knew it wasn't. Meki was a lot of things, but clumsy wasn't one of them. He would never drop something if he could help it. As the servo sprite fussed around her head, Zelia picked up a heavy-looking ladle that Elise had used to slop Grok's stew into their bowls the night before. It wasn't much of a defense.
It's so funny, the sense memories.
Zelia inched
'Cause
towards the cargo bay.
when I first started listening to this
other side of the hold's heavy doors.
book,
She paused,
I was playing Destiny
listening
2,
through the thick metal.
and listening to her
There was a flurry of movement
grab a
on the other side of
ladle
the door,
reminds me
the
of
scrape of leather against deck
being
plates,
on,
and then silence.
not IO,
Trying
Nessus?
to ignore the increasingly frantic buzzing of the
Planet.
servo
yeah,
sprite,
and
Zelia stepped forwards.
doing
The doors
the
wheezed
contact
open.
missions.
Hello?
It's like
Meki, are you in here?
she's about to get in a tussle with these guys while I was trying to keep
The cargo bay was silent.
taken away from the
Lights kept permanently low to protect the more valuable artifacts. She
vault.
crept through the collection, tall cabinets on either side. Something moved ahead. Her grip tightened on the ladle. Meki? Seriously, this isn't funny. A boot crunched behind her. Zelia whirled round, swinging the ladle. You need to be careful, a gruff voice said. You could hurt someone with that. Zelia cried out as thick fingers caught her wrist. He squeezed, and the metal spoon clattered to the floor. That's better. A stranger loomed over her, muscles bunched beneath a scruffy vest festooned with brightly coloured patches. His hair was styled into a lurid green mohawk, a tattoo of a large red cat leaping over his left ear. It was a Runak, a ferocious scavenger native to Targian with jagged scales
Okay.
instead of fur.
I
Zelia
thought
had only seen the creatures out on the
before
plain,
that she was
but
the
imagined
Runak
they
that she was
smelled
talking about. I
better
thought
than the thug who was
there were
threatening her
thugs
home.
that were
Let go of me,
aliens
Zelia cried
that were
out, trying to
Runaks that
pull away.
were attacking
I
her.
don't think so,
But these are
Lando.
gangers
The
from
tattooed thug leered
the
with a
hive
collar
world
over his shoulder.
that
You can
just
come out,
that
he
they
said
are
with
the
a little
Runaks. So they're just that's
The
their
thug must only
mascot.
be a year or two older than Zelia. He
That,
was
that makes
strong.
more sense now that I'm listening to
There
it
was no way
again.
of breaking his grip. More strangers slipped out of the shadow. 2 boys and a girl with spiked purple hair and a glowing eye implant. They all wore wore similar patches on their
I was
jackets.
like thinking they were cat people. Like, these are all cat people.
What do you want? Zelia squeaked, and her captor smiled, showing uneven, stained teeth. That's a good question. The thug glanced around, his small, cruel eyes scanning the rusting relics on the shelves. We thought this place would be full of treasure, didn't we, Talon? The ganger behind him nodded. This one wasn't as big, but still looked like he could handle himself in a fight. His blonde hair was cropped short at the sides, and a small scar ran through one of his thick, dark eyebrows. He held no weapons in his gloved hands, but Zelia couldn't help but notice the snub-nosed beamer hanging next to the leather pouch on his belt. That's what you told us, Riz, but it looks like a load of old junk to me. Yeah, old junk. Riz
I forgot that guy's feet again.
pulling Zelia closer. Where's the real booty? Where have you stashed it? This is all we have, Zelia told him, glancing down at the hefty weapon Riz held in his free hand. The ganger had fashioned a mace out of a long girder topped with a blunt slab of corroded metal. You like my spudjacker? Riz said, brandishing the makeshift weapon. I call her Splitter. Do you want to know why? I think I can guess, Zelia replied. 'Cause I split skulls with her, he said anyway, as if she were the idiot, not him. Ain't that right, Talon? The blonde-haired Juve shifted uncomfortably, glancing nervously at the cargo bay doors. We should go, Riz. There's nothing here. Riz glared at the younger kid. Oi, I give the orders, not you. Then order us to get out of here. We're wasting our time. Riz swung around, nearly pulling Zelia off her feet. I'll waste you in a minute, he growled, brandishing Splitter menacingly. Zelia saw her chance and took it. She lashed out with her foot, kicking Riz's shin. Ow! He yelped, spinning her around so she crashed into the nearest cabinet, cogs and gears tumbling all around her. Zelia snatched a length of metal piping from the floor, but a swipe of the spudjacker sent it flying across the cargo bay. Nice try, Riz sneered above her, but I'm not going to ask you again. Where's the valuable stuff? Where are you hiding it? I told you, she shouted back, holding her aching fingers. This is all there is. Liar, Riz bellowed, raising the spudjacker high above his head. Splitter hates liars, and so do I. With a feral roar, he brought the mace crashing down. Chapter 2. The Runak Warriors. No! Talon yelled, barging into Riz and throwing off the larger ganger's aim. Splitter smashed harmlessly into the deck. What do you think you're doing? Riz thundered, swinging the spudjacker at Talon. The blonde-haired boy leapt back, the club narrowly missing him. The next time, he wasn't so lucky. Riz lashed out again with the mace, catching Talon in the side. The boy crashed into a cabinet, the air knocked out of him. Leave him alone, Zelia yelled. Stay out of this, girl, Riz sneered as the rest of the gang stepped back, too scared to interfere. He's gone too far this time.
Wobbly.
He loomed over Talon, the spudjacker held high. Zelia looked up. The servo sprite was still buzzing around the ceiling. She tapped the box on her sleeve, activating a channel to the ship's central cogitator. Danger in cargo bay, she shouted. Protect the artifacts. Aye, Riz said, his spudjacker frozen in midair. What's that supposed to mean? You'll see, said Zelia with a smile, as every servo sprite Meki had ever constructed swarmed on the cargo and descended on the gangers. Ah! Riz screamed as dozens of tiny robots jabbed at him with needle-sharp data connectors. Get him off me! He tried to swat them away with Splitter, but only lost his balance, crashing to the floor. The other gangers ran into each other as they were mobbed by the servo swarm. Even Talon was forced to throw up his arms to protect himself, but Zelia saw him grin at her before yelling at the others, Let's get out of here! They all ran, Riz included, still swiping at the servo sprites that yanked painfully at his mohawk. Zelia jumped to her feet as soon as they were gone. She ran to the cogitator terminal next to the doors, activating the ship's pict feed. Images scrolled over the display, displaying pict casts from every corner of the ship. She scrolled through to the external feeds and watched the gang members charge down the scriptor's ramp, servo sprites dive-bombing the would-be raiders like fire wasps. As soon as they were clear, she pressed a button and the ramp swung up to slam shut. Suddenly exhausted, she slumped forward, leaning heavily against the terminal. Her legs were like jelly, her breath ragged. She tapped her vox. "Mum, are you there? Mum?" Elise still didn't answer. That settled it. If her mum wasn't on the ship and wasn't answering her vox, then there was only one place she could be. "Ouch!" cried Talon as one of the small flying robots jabbed the back of his neck. "You wanted us off the ship? We're off the ship!" The automaton chattered angrily in return, and Talon couldn't help but smile. Ladle Girl had done good. It took a lot to take on the Runak warriors, but she had sent them packing. Their job done, the servo sprites flocked back to the funny little ship, disappearing into a porthole. "Let's get back underground," Talon shouted. But Riz wasn't happy. "You don't tell me what to do, Talon. Not now, not ever. We're going back onto that ship to teach that runt a lesson she'll never forget." The others didn't move, looking from Riz to Talon, not sure who to follow. Talon's hand dropped down to his beamer. Riz snorted. "You're going to blast me, Talon. Is that it? It's funny. In all the years you've had that clipped to your belt, I've never seen you use it. You haven't got the guts. You're a coward, guard boy. Always have been, always will be." Talon didn't have a chance to respond to the jibe. A cry echoed across the vast landing bay, and he turned to see a soldier of the Astra Militarum making straight for them through the clustered space cruisers. He was wearing the Imperial Guard standard khaki green uniform, a long shock stick gripped in his gloved hand, capable of delivering a charge that could stop a full-grown grox in its tracks. "Hey!" the guardsman shouted.
Is it really only 5?
Doing up there?
I'm gonna clean brush a little bit.
Burst, shooting one
Take another
last venomous
quick
look
break.
at the planet
I don't know
above
how long that
before
was.
yelling, "Scatter!"
Nah.
The warriors did as they were told, Talon included. He ducked behind a stack of. Should have seen the treasures
Thanks for
inside
hanging
that
out.
ship. They were worth a fortune.
Yeah, I was basically just
Talon
updating
attacked me before I could take
groups
what was
with
rightfully mine.
and Instagram with shots
Mine. Unak
of
called.
existing stuff. Can you guys hear the audio
Riz bowed low to cover his
book?
mistake.
Okay.
"Yours, leader." "He's a liar." Every face turned to watch Talon as he strode into the assembly. "There was nothing worth stealing on that crate, just a load of broken machines." "Then why did you attack me?" Riz spat back. "A good question," Unak agreed from her throne. "Because our brave champion was about to flatten an unarmed girl." Riz growled. "She deserved it." "Why? Because she kicked you in the shin?" Talon stuck out his bottom lip. "Poor baby." "Is that what happens, champion?" Unak asked, barely disguising the disdain in her voice. Riz whirled around to face the throne. "She had robots," he lied, desperate to save face. "Huge, hulking robots, armed to their metallic teeth." Talon laughed out loud. "You're kidding! Is that really what you're going with?" Talon turned to address their leader. "Oh, Riz is a champion, all right. A champion of barefaced lies. There were robots, but they were barely bigger than my hand." Riz's face had gone as red as his tattoo. "There were hundreds of them." 3, maybe 4 dozen, Talon countered. "They were annoying, but hardly dangerous." "Says the one who told us to run." "Only because we were wasting our time. You said there was treasure on the ship, but it was a load of rubbish, just like you." "What?" Riz bellowed. "And now Essa is in the guardhouse. Because of Riz, not me." Talon jutted out his jaw. "He doesn't deserve to be our champion." "Take that back," Riz spat, brandishing his spongehacker, "or I'll show you how Splitter got her name." Talon held his ground. "I'd like to see you try." "You're not the only one," Unak said, licking her lips as she sat up in her chair. "Your honor has been questioned, champion. What are you going to do about it?" "Oh, kill him!" Riz roared, charging at Talon. A cheer went up from the assembled throng. The warriors always ready to watch a good scrap, but Talon was ready for his opponent.
Use my
He
card.
snatched his beamer from its holster and aimed it straight at Riz. The champion
She has
swung
another card?
Splitter in an arc, easily knocking the beamer from
The only
Talon's
problem
grip,
is I'm gonna have to.
just as he'd been expecting. Talon shoulder barged Riz, knocking the champion off his feet. Riz landed on his face, Splitter thudding to the floor. Talon dropped on his rival,
He's
fists
doing something
flying.
Okay.
The reason Riz had never seen Talon use the beamer was that it didn't work. Talon had stolen it from his dad's barracks on the day he'd run away from home. It was a family heirloom, an antique passed down from one generation to the next. It had always been for show. Unlike his fists, Talon was a brawler, whereas Riz was nothing more than a bully. The so-called champion had managed to fool Onak for years, but not anymore. Talon would show the entire gang how much of a coward their champion actually was. Pummeled Riz. But the
With
champion
these
managed to kick up with his
Necrons,
boot,
the
catching
problem
Talon
that I
in the
have
chest.
is
Talon
that since they are
stumbled into the baying
monopose
crowd
and they
and was
come the way
immediately
that they
shot
are,
back towards Riz by at least 3 overexcited onlookers.
in situations like this, with the old kits, I would have twisted the gun to where the like this was attached, and then I would glue this to the knee. Like, I really don't like this flex. I like durable figs. I don't want to have to. You don't want to have to repair something that you spend a bunch of time painting and stuff.
He yelled at the champion as he brought the spudjacker down on the other side of Riz's head. Do you give in? He lifted the weapon for a third and final strike, and Riz looked up, grinning horribly. Backlash, the champion shouted. Electricity crackled from a power cell hidden in the spudjacker's shaft. The energy surged into Talon's body, every muscle cramping. With a strangled cry, he crumpled to the floor, dropping the weapon. All around them, the warriors were chanting Riz's name, urging their champion to finish the job. Grinning with triumph, Riz recovered his spudjacker and held it high above his head like a trophy, bellowing in triumph. With his name ringing in everyone's ears, he turned to Talon and lifted the bulky weapon for the final time, ready to deliver a killer blow. And this, Riz snarled, spit flying from his lips, is why I am champion and you are nothing. Chapter 3. The Siren. A siren blared through the Great Hall. Even Riz looked around in surprise, forgetting that he was about to flatten his rival once and for all. "What's that?" he asked, as Onak rose to her feet. "I don't believe it," the leader said. "It can't be." "Can't be what?" Talon stammered, still barely able to move. He'd heard plenty of alarms in his time, mainly from breaking into the hive's many manufactoria and foundries, but nothing like this. If the other alerts were like the annoying buzzing of flies, this one was like the roar of a lion, so loud, so urgent. "Onak," Riz said, turning to their leader. The colour had dripped the tattoos that smothered her face. "I haven't heard that for years," she stammered in reply. "And even then, it was a false alarm." "But what does it mean?" Talon asked, struggling back to his feet. Onak met his confused gaze, and Talon saw real fear in her eyes. "Invasion," she said bluntly.
Invasion!
Zelia loved getting out of the hive. She had never been one for cities, especially the gigantic towers of the hive worlds, rising like jagged spikes from blighted landscapes all across the Imperium. Nothing about them was natural, from the rich living in luxury in the cloud-drenched spires to the poor scraping an unbearable existence in the squalid depths of the Undercity. She hated the stink of recycled air,
I don't know if that entire
never
thing was
feeling
off
the heat
screen.
of the sun against her skin. She had spent so much of her life outdoors, braving the elements on dozens of worlds across the Imperium. Out here, she felt alive. Out here, she felt free. Zelia glanced back at Ral Rata, rising high into the sky behind her. A siren blared out of the hive. What was that? It took 20 minutes or so to reach the dig, her grav bike spluttering as it skimmed over the wasteland. Her mum had set up camp in the shadow of ancient, dust-blasted ruins. dome-shaped tents huddled together, surrounded by crates ready to be transported back to the scriptor. Her mum's skimmer sat near the largest tent, but there was no sign of Elise and the others. Zelia pulled on her brakes, expecting the bike to slow. Instead, its decrepit anti-grav generator backfired, smoke billowing from the suspensors. Zelia cried out as the bike dipped, its nose striking the ground. She was thrown from her seat as the bike pinwheeled through the air. Bike and rider
This is the only
crashed into
gap
the dirt at the same time, sending up a plume of dust.
that
Zelia!
I've
Elise Lore raced
had.
to the main tent, making straight for her daughter.
Somebody was asking about gaps.
There was no mistaking that Zelia and Elise were related. They had the same dark skin and mops of unmanageable black hair piled high on their heads. A pale-skinned boy barreled out of the tent behind Elise. "What have you done?" he demanded as he raced over to the smoking grav bike. "No, that's fine, Mickey," Zelia muttered as Elise helped her up. "You just worry about the bike. It's not like I nearly broke my neck or anything." Elise's assistant was already examining the downed vehicle, completely oblivious to Zelia's sarcasm. He was tall and lanky, his long limbs draped in the flowing red robes of his people. Like all Martians, he had a natural affinity for machines and was always tinkering with the archaeotech unearthed by Elise's digs. According to Lex mechanic Erasmus,
I'm uncomfortable.
Mars worshipped technology itself and communicated with the spirits they believed inhabited all machines. Zelia wasn't sure if she believed in the existence
pads
of
on
machine
my
spirits herself, but knew that
armchair,
the company of gadgets and
arms on
gizmos
my
to other
office chair
He even looked a bit like a
are
machine,
super
thanks to the
garbage
exoframe that helped him move his withered right
and
arm.
have flattened out now that
Mickey
I've
had apparently
used them
built
enough.
the bionic cuff himself when he was only 3 years old.
The padding, anyway.
As she watched, he pulled
Left
up the
elbow was
panel
like
to
killing
access
me.
the bike's engine and flicked down a number of the magnifying lenses he wore on a band around his head. He went straight to work, assisted by a pair of servo sprites.
What I should
that
do
fetched tools for him
is
from
scoot
the
up
large pack he wore on his back.
instead of leaning over
"Are
my
you here because of the siren?" Elise asked.
Let's
checking
try
for
that.
injury.
See if that works.
Zelia said, wincing as her mum brushed a graze on her cheek. "Although that is freaky. Then what are you doing out of
See if I
bed?
don't knock
I thought
everything
you
off
was
my
out
desk.
bargain after working so hard last night." Zelia told her about the break. And the
It's slightly more comfortable.
Lisa's eyes went wide. "What?" She turned and stomped into the main dome, Zelia limping slightly as she tried to keep up. A silver-haired man was hunched over
Okay,
an antique
so
Vox in the
now
corner
I'm
of the
here.
tent, twisting knobs on the side of the dented unit as he tried to find a signal. "Erasmus," Elise began, her anger barely in check, "did you lock the hatch when we left this morning?" The man looked up in puzzlement. "Hatch? On the scriptor, Zelia was attacked by gangers in her own cargo bay." Erasmus got up from the Vox and hurried over. "By the Emperor, are you all right, my dear?" "She's fine," Elise snapped, answering for Zelia. "But you have to be more careful. You know how dangerous the hive can be." The Lex mechanic scratched his cheek, stubble rasping against his fingers. "I truly am sorry. I just wanted to get to the dig." He looked up, distracted by the siren that was still wailing across the wastelands. "I don't like that," he stammered, pointing in the direction of the hive. "Not one bit." He scuttled back to the Vox and grabbed a headset, pressing a Voxcaster to his ear. "Now, I'm trying to find out what's happening back there, but there's a lot of chatter." His face suddenly went as white as his thinning hair. "Erasmus?" Elise asked. He leapt up from the Vox without explaining. "We need to get everything back to the scriptor, now." "Why?" Elise asked, following Erasmus outside. "Oh no," he whimpered. "It's already begun." Zelia shielded her eyes against the sun. There were dots on the horizon, moving in quickly. Frowning, she pulled her omniscope from her bandolier and...
Ethan, here come the Necrons.
"They're ships," she said, as the dots swam into focus. "What kind of ships?" Elise asked. "I don't know. I've never seen anything like them." That was true enough. The ships were shaped like crescents, their dark green wings curling forward like the jaws of a nighthawk beetle.
Ooh, okay, if they're Necrons, if they're crescent ships with dark green wings.
Cannons that jutted out beneath the cockpit.
Yeah, it's a Attack of the Necron, I think. It is. There's a series of 40K audiobooks, and this one is narrated by David Tennant.
She couldn't quite make it out.
These are like young adult.
Identification? She asked out loud. Unknown. The
You know,
scope's inbuilt cogitator
for like
replied in a clipped version of her mum's voice.
middle schoolers.
Let me see.
That's why I'm listening to it.
Snatching the scope from her hands. Hey, careful! The omniscope had been a
Oh yeah, so green wings. What do you think are the what dynasty?
Using her own voice print as a joke. You can finally order me around, Celia, if you dare. No one was laughing now. Erasmus
What dynasty are the green wing?
Seeing the bizarre craft for himself. What are they, Erasmus? Elise asked.
Probably be
Don't you recognize the sound? He said, shoving the scope into Elise's hands and rushing back into the tent.
Has the dark
No,
green.
Elise said, shaking her head as she looked through the device. That's not possible. They're extinct. Extinct? Zelia asked. That's what we thought, Erasmus shouted from inside the dome. But what if we were wrong? Mum? Zelia asked, her voice wavering. What are they? Elise crouched down in front of Zelia and gave her the scope.
My brush is turning into a stick, so I'm gonna resuscitate it, and I'll show you the.
Oh well. You're scaring me, Mum. I'm scared too, baby. And for good reason. Behind her, the first wave of fighters had already reached the hive. How had they moved so fast?
There's a charger. That's the
fire, their cannons spitting
cover.
bolts of emerald
Warhammer
energy.
Adventures.
They're called the Necrons, Elise said. And they won't rest until they've destroyed every living thing on this planet. Chapter 4. The Necrons. The strange green energy punched deep into the hive, fire blossoming wherever it struck. It was more like lightning than lasfire, crackling from the Necron cannons. But the invaders weren't just targeting the city. More of the emerald beams were carving deep canyons into the ground beyond the hive, a fog of dust and rubble clouding the horizon. Grab as much as you can, Elise said, making for the tent. Meki, how's that grab bike looking? The Martian boy shook his head. Their motivators are fused. It's going to take time to repair. We haven't time, Erasmus said, charging out of the tent, his arms brimming with artifacts. Elise grabbed one of the containers stacked beside the dome. We can use my skimmer. Zelia, take this.
Sautek, what?
She passed the heavy container to Zelia, who struggled
Did I need you?
Oversled. Before long, the skimmer was piled high.
Just Sautek was the.
We won't be able to take much more, Mum.
I mean, I don't know if I need to stop the stream and transfer money.
Erasmus agreed, slinging a leather satchel over his shoulder. Elise hesitated, looking back at the containers still scattered around the camp. You're probably right, but the specimens... There will be other digs, Elise, the Lex mechanic told her, clambering into the skimmer. We've already waited too long. The ground shook, and Zelia stumbled. That had been the third earth tremor in as many minutes. Elise leapt onto the skimmer. Zelia, Meki, get on.
So the
Zelia was about to follow her mum onto
there's
the craft when she spotted something in the
earthquakes.
distance. The ground between them and the hive was changing colour. A dark stain sweeping out across the plain. She opened the scope and zoomed in, letting out a gasp. A vast swarm of metallic insects were scurrying towards them on sharp, multi-jointed legs. And lo, the Necron scarabs thronged. An ashen-faced Erasmus muttered from the back of the skimmer, devouring everything in sight. Not helpful, Erasmus, Elise said, reaching a hand down to help Zelia onto the hover sled. What's he talking about? Zelia asked, climbing on board. It's nothing, Elise said. But Zelia could tell she was lying. Just a fragment of text from the Rakosan scrolls. Her eyes went wide. Oh no. What? Elise jumped from the skimmer and ran back to the main dome. I forgot my data slate. It has all my notes. Start her up, Zelia. Zelia shoved the driver's seat and started the engine. The skimmer's anti-grav generators whirred, and the hover sled rose unsteadily into the air to hang a meter from the ground. Mum, come on! She yelled across the camp. What is that? Meki asked, pointing from where he had positioned himself among the tech. Zelia followed his gaze to see hover chariots racing towards them. Each looked like a floating green.
It was like hover chariots. I guess those are the
powerful cannons. Metallic figures were hunched over the controls.
hover chariots.
For all the world like mechanical skeletons.
Catacomb command mark?
Yeah, those.
Robots?
I assume.
Zelia asked. No, Erasmus replied. Those are the Necrons. They're alive. of speaking. But artificial intelligence is prohibited. Maggie said, "There's nothing artificial about it," the Lex mechanic replied, before glancing back at the tent. "Where is Elise?" Zelia's mum darted out of the door, a data slate clasped in her hand. "Sorry, I couldn't leave this behind. The nearest Necron fired, green lightning lancing across the camp to slam into the ancient ruin. Fragments of rock flew everywhere, the shockwave knocking Elise from her feet. "Mum!" Elise scrambled up and vaulted into the seat beside Zelia. "I'm all right. Go, go!"
Too pasty.
Zelia opened the throttle, expecting the skimmer to shoot forwards. It didn't move. She stamped on the accelerator, but it still didn't respond. "Maggie!" Elise yelled. "What's wrong with it?" The Martian leaped from the skimmer and peered into the engine, lenses flicking down in front of his eyes. "There is no power to the forward thrusters," he reported, his voice unwavering. "I can fix it." "Then make it quick," Erasmus snapped. A blast of Necron energy atomized the main tent. Fragments of canvas settled all around like burning flakes of snow. The Necrons were almost upon them. Their faces were like steel skulls, green eyes glowing malevolently beneath scowling brows. Another bolt of luminous energy crackled towards them, heading straight for the skimmer. "Everyone out!" Zelia screamed. But it was already too late. Chapter 5. Space Marines. The lightning never found its target. A huge teardrop-shaped pod crashed down in front of them, blocking the Necron energy with its riveted metal sides. Heavy ramps slammed down, sending up a fresh cloud of dust. Zelia coughed, unable to see, but there was no mistaking the heavy stomp of boots or the clanking of battle-ravaged armor. Zelia had never seen one up close, but knew exactly who the arrivals were. Everyone did. They were living legends.
No problem, Sean. Thanks.
Protectors of
Take it
humanity
easy.
against the horrors of the universe. They were war-made
Sean's just
flesh.
leaving because Space
They were
Marines showed up.
Space Marines.
That's
The
why.
dust settled, and Zelia found herself looking up at an armored giant almost 3 times her height, its imposing helm staring right at her. "Get away from here," the Space Marine rumbled in a voice so deep that she could feel it in her bones. "Now." She could barely move, let alone respond. She had seen pictures of the Ultramarines, the blue armor familiar from hundreds of tattered tapestries and stained glass viewports, but to see one face to face, that was both an honor and a curse. Those who found themselves on the battlegrounds of the Adeptus Astartes very rarely survived to tell the tale. As she gaped, the Space Marine joined his brothers, charging into battle, his whirring chainsword held high. He brought the mighty weapon down, slicing straight through the nearest Necron battle skimmer. The alien's cannon exploded in a blaze of green light. By the time the glare faded, the Space Marine had already moved on to its next target, along with the rest of his squad. "Maggie," Elise yelled down at the Martian. "Anytime soon would be good." "Working on it," the Martian boy said, up to his elbows in cables. Zelia looked to where the scarabs had reached her abandoned anti-grav bike. The metal insect scuttled over its chassis, jaws chattering. 1 minute the grav bike was there, and the next it had gone. The scarabs had dismantled it in seconds, devouring every single part. Now she understood what the old scroll had meant. Worst of all, they'd be next if they didn't get the skimmer moving. "Maggie!" "Yes," the Martian snapped back. "I know." Zelia peered over the side. Mackie's right hand was pressed against a circuit board, the tiny haptic implants on his fingertips plugging into the skimmer's cogitator. His eyes were closed, his lips moving as if in prayer as the strange metal strips he called his electus glowed eerily on his arms and head. With a rattle, the skimmer shook. Mackie disengaged his fingers and opened his eyes, looking straight at her. "Try it now, Zelia Law." She revved the engine, and the skimmer jolted forwards. "You did it!" Elise cheered, helping Mackie onto the back of the skimmer. "Of course," he said plainly, his servo sprites dropping onto his shoulders. There was no arrogance in his voice. It was merely a statement of fact. Zelia opened the throttle and the skimmer shot forwards. She weaved the craft through the battling Space Marines, avoiding both Necron lightning and Space Marine artillery. Get us back to the script hall, Elise shouted. We're getting off this planet. By the look of it, they weren't the only ones.
Hello.
The hive was still under attack, much of the gigantic spike ablaze, and ships
Still streaming, but listening to a audiobook,
spaceport located halfway up
so that people aren't super bored.
the evacuation of Targian had begun. A Necron scarab leapt up onto the front of the skimmer and sank its pointed teeth into the metal. Oh no, you don't, cried Elise, grabbing an ancient generator coil from a crate of artifacts. She lobbed the artifact at the scarab, knocking the one-eyed bug from the skimmer. The paint had blistered where it had plunged its fangs into the metalwork, smoke curling from two perfectly round holes. Another scarab appeared beside Zelia. She cried out in alarm and knocked it from the side of the skimmer before it could take a bite. The hover sled lurched to the right as she took her eyes from the controls. She straightened up, but could hear the scamper of tiny legs on the bottom of the chassis. We're going to be smothered by those things in a minute, she yelled. Meki tapped the screen he kept cuffed to his left wrist. Go up, he told her. What do you mean? What I said. Fly. She twisted in her seat. Meki, what are you talking about? This is a skimmer, not an aircraft. The ghost of a smile played over his pale lips. Not anymore. I gave the anti-grav generator ideas above its station. Look. Leaning across, he grabbed the controls. Hey! Meki pulled back sharply on the steering wheel, and the skimmer soared into the sky. Unwilling to give up on their prize, some of the scarabs took to the air, razor-sharp wings sprouting out of glistening exoskeletons, but the skimmer was moving too fast, even for them. Zelia laughed out loud. Meki was a bit weird, but he was also brilliant. We will not be able to stay up here for long, I told him gravely, but the power cell should last until we get back to the script hall. The skimmer suddenly dipped,
This
dropping
guy's
like a
head
stone
is
before leveling out again.
super jacked
Sure
up.
about that? She gasped. It's not the skimmer, Erasmus cried out as the Necron crawled onto the back of the hover sled. The gruesome skeleton grabbed Erasmus's satchel strap and pulled, trying to yank the Lex mechanic out of the skimmer. Help me! Meki leant over, attempting to pry the alien's fingers from the bag while the servo sprite
Excuse me.
the skull-faced attacker. It won't let go, Erasmus wailed. Hang on, Zelia said. She had problems of her own. One of the crescent-shaped fighters had spotted them and was swooping down to intercept. Zelia swerved as the gunship fired, the crackling energy missing them by inches. The Necron fighter threw itself into a tight turn, coming around for a fresh attack. Zelia gunned the engine, but would never be able to outrun the alien ship. Its Necron pilot locked onto her and prepared to fire, before exploding into a ball of flaming shrapnel. Zelia looked up to see an Aquila shining bright on the nose of a thundering blue aircraft. Bristling with missile launchers and plasma cannons, the heavily armoured fighter was chunky and compact. It looked far too heavy for its hooked wings, each emblazoned with the silver U-shaped insignia that the Ultramarines wore on their shoulder pads. And yet, despite its obvious heft, the gunship turned and twisted in the air with ease, the Space Marine at the controls already targeting another Necron ship.
I don't know if that's a Storm Talon. What's the small one?
The Necron nearly had him out of the skimmer.
What's the little bird, little fighter bird?
He shouted. No, Erasmus said. I can't.
Is it Storm Talon?
Celia looked up and saw the Space Marine throw his gunship into a barrel roll, corkscrewing through the air. Suddenly, she knew what to do. Hold on to something, she barked. Why? Elise asked. Just do it. Zelia jerked the controls to the right. The skimmer went into a spin, its cargo of ancient artifacts spraying out like sparks from the whirling firecrackers that her mother launched each and every Ascension day. The relics tumbled to the ground, where they were instantly devoured by the sea of scarabs below. Meki grabbed hold of Erasmus as the Necron lost its grip and plunged to the ground with them. Wrestling with the controls, Zelia leveled out the now empty skimmer. Is everyone all right? Yes, Erasmus stammered. Thanks to you. Sorry about your artifacts, Mum. Elise squeezed her daughter's arm. Are you kidding? That was incredible. All thanks to Meki's tinkering, she said, glancing back at the Martian. He was sitting looking straight ahead. Were those tears in his eyes? Then she realized why. Only one of the servo sprites was clinging to his robes. The other must have gone down with the Necron. Zelia faced front, staring through the skimmer's Plastech windscreen. There wasn't time to grieve for a robot, no matter how attached Meki was to his creations. They needed to get back to the Scriptor before another Necron tried to bring them down.
Ah, cool. Thanks, man.
They just managed to pull off that.
I haven't played.
Next time,
I've got.
you might not be so lucky.
Yeah, I don't have a Stormhawk. I have a Storm Talent, I think, or 2,
Chapter 6.
but I haven't used them in forever.
Talon felt as if he knew every inch of the tunnels beneath Ralrata. That was impossible, of course. The world beneath the city was nearly as big as the one above, but it had been his home for the last 3 years. He had fallen in with the Runak warriors within weeks of running away from home. It was impossible to survive in the Underhive without joining a gang. He didn't like everything about the warriors, Riz included, but they'd kept him safe. Up to now. Keep moving, Riz hissed behind him. They were scrambling along a ventilation shaft on their hands
Excuse
and
me.
knees, splashing through thrown new ward. Talon had never been so glad for the pads he wore around his knees. He didn't want to think what lurked in the stagnant water that pooled in the pipes which snaked through the hive at all levels. What do you think I'm doing? He snapped back, tempted to slip and accidentally boot Riz in his stupid tattooed face. There was another explosion above them. Dust tumbled from cracks in the pipe. They had travelled back up to the middle section of the tower using an abandoned maintenance lift that the warriors used to reach the spaceport, and with it, the rich pickings of the starfarers who used the dock. Up here, the noise
Yeah, you done?
was louder than ever.
Done assembling Space Marines?
You think it is?
Far from it.
Riz stammered. His voice was small.
Have you done the Meltagun dudes yet?
Didn't hesitate with his reply. Seen us?
No.
Aliens? Riz squeaked. Are
One
you
dude,
sure?
3 multi-gun
What else
dudes,
would it be?
and then the 10.
Talon had heard about aliens all his life. His
Assault
dad didn't
dudes.
believe in telling kids fairy stories. They need to know what the universe is really like.
There's not much you can do with the
He
blade
also
guard
used to tell
heads,
Talon's long-suffering mum.
unfortunately.
Talon and Carl
So I wondered, like, so the blades on these,
Tales of green
the bayonet kind of deals.
Eldar and Tau.
I think
Major
Uh,
I
I'm gonna go not energy based, right? Like these should be glowing, right? These are
They are
like power weapons.
correct. And because of those new destroyer models, it's not just energy,
Mm-hmm.
as it used to be like, oh, like, the blade is turned on, so this thing is appearing. No, it's like an actual, like, steel that is
It's more okay. So it's more like the normal stuff. You're saying
If you look at
you're saying
the
before it was like a Halo
energy sword.
energy sword.
If you look at the destroyer lore, at the very bottom of the weapon, there's cracks in the blade.
Yeah, and they'll be fighting too.
Oh yeah.
Fighters are bound to target the guardhouse first.
Here,
Talon's chest tightened. Would his dad be there, facing the enemy, last gun in hand? Besides, you've got
Oh,
spear,
interesting.
haven't you?
Okay.
Riz's
Yeah,
son
I wonder what I should be doing with them then.
been scraping along the
I mean, it is a hyper phase weapon.
ladder, which headed up
Do
to a
with that
maintenance
as well.
hatch. The
Gotcha.
hinges squealed as Talon opened it, but no
we
one
have
came to
drinks.
investigate. The Ral Ratans
Cool.
had bigger concerns than a couple of gangers. Emerged in a dingy
Chargers that the Chaos assault guys raptors or different raptors?
It will be chaos up top. Grab whatever you can. Food, supplies, weapons, and get back down here. We'll be safe in the camp. Alan didn't believe that for a minute, but knew what happened if you disobeyed Onak. She had been right about one thing, though. The streets were in chaos. The rattle of automations was everywhere, accompanied by screams and the concussive blasts of frag grenades. Come on, said Riz, drawing Splitter and barging past Talon. I don't want to be up here for long.
Man, what time you got? Or do you know? I can. Wait, never mind. I've got an iPad.
The market had been abandoned. Most of the stores
6:30.
were looted by rival gangs.
So
The market catered
if I go like 3 more hours,
manufactoria of the middle levels. A heady mix of
it's
off-world
3:30. So
labor
I've been painting for 3 hours.
The place reeked of oil and sweat, an unnatural fog hanging in the air.
Let's see. Let's get these guys out of here.
Smashed against the metal
So this
shutters of the
dude-
workshop on the other side of the street. Talon This is old Hinkin's place, you know, the toolsmith. I saw him fixing an old las cutter the other day, but he's left it behind. You can do some serious damage
Nice.
with the las cutter. A blast ripped around the corner of the street, scattering.
Yeah, hopefully, I like the 9th Reserves
Forgetting all about his prize.
stuff.
His answer came as three guardsmen
In theory,
across the
we
entrance,
haven't played yet, but
firing at an unseen enemy.
I feel like that, among other things, is gonna help with the
Need to go.
melee
Energy
dudes.
lanced through the air and the soldier turned to dust. Riz froze where he stood, still gripping Splitter, terrified out of his wits. Talon went to leave him, but then stopped himself. Riz was a pain in the nether regions, but he didn't deserve to end up like those guardsmen. He ran back and pulled Riz towards the maintenance hatch. Come on! Another explosion knocked them both off their feet. Talon hit the ground hard, only narrowly avoiding being crushed by Splitter, which clattered to the floor beside him. He looked up, ears ringing, and saw three figures stalking through the dust and smoke.
Okay.
With hunched shoulders, their skeletal limbs clanking as they advanced on their enemy. Their eyes glowed green,
So,
as bright as
in
the
3
strange
hours,
alien glyphs that gleamed at the center of exposed rib cages. Talon, help
this.
me! Talon looked in the direction of the frightened voice.
Oh, yeah.
Riz was pinned to the ground beneath a massive slab of masonry.
I mean,
Is
you know,
that 10 warriors?
like I've done, you know, I did some stuff on this which I shouldn't have done. But I'm just trying to think of, like, I did these scarabs,
Do something! Riz whined. At the end of the
Two.
street, the Astra Militarum were fighting back.
these two,
Blast fire bouncing
Yeah,
harmlessly
this,
from the
huh?
metal invaders' gaunt bodies.
Or is everything...
The aliens returned
Well, everything
fire
should be the
with
same.
large energy blasters they wielded
Well,
in
what
their
are you
clawed
asking?
hands.
We're just asking...
Talon didn't
Some
wait
of
to see the
some of them I may have done a
result.
thicker coat
He looked around,
that's better.
seeing Splitter lying forgotten on the floor.
Um,
You better
I'm just saying that, like,
again, he warned, snatching up
this is the
his
stuff that I've
sword.
gotten done
The weapon was already
in
over his head as he turned
the
towards
time that I've
trapped
been
champion.
streaming now.
Oh, what are you doing? Riz cried out as Talon
Are you
brought
pleased with
Splitter
the
down,
Xandrian
pummeling the
base, or
unmovable
would you...
chunk
Yeah,
of
no,
debris. I thought you were gonna hit me. Riz
no, I
screamed
think
as
this
Talon
is
slammed the rock
this
over
is
and
not
over
terrible.
again, cracks spiderwebbing from each blow.
Um,
Don't tempt me, just hold still.
if I'd done the Zenith yellow,
One of the
like I
aliens
wanted to do,
turned towards the
I would have had to do
metal
more
against
cleanup,
concrete. Hurry up, Riz pleaded,
on other stuff that
taking his
shouldn't have
eyes
been
from the
yellow.
metal monster.
As it is,
Skeleton turned.
nobody knows that this other stuff isn't supposed to be tan.
Talon roared with
Right,
frustration
so,
as he brought the spudjacker down one last
I think after I
time,
wash
splitting
everything,
concrete in two.
which is gonna
He
take an
rammed the
hour
end of the staff into the
or
crack,
more
prying
just
him
to
into
wash
halves
everything.
apart so Riz could wriggle out. The alien raised its weapon. Give me that, Riz said, clambering to his feet and grabbing Splitter. He shoved against Talon, knocking him over.
Yeah.
Talon hit the ground hard, shards of rockroot digging into his back.
Okay, so I've got
Riz was already
basically
running for
5
the
more guys to
ventilation
do,
shaft, leaving Talon for dead.
and then I've
The alien fired,
gotten
green
everything
energy
yellow.
arcing towards Riz. The beam hit the champion between the shoulder blades, and in a flash,
Thanks.
Riz was gone. Splitter clattered to
What
the
happened
ground,
was,
his shaft smoke
like 10 years ago, there was a
ripped in mere
Paint a
seconds.
Battle Force contest.
The alien swung
And
his blaster
we have
around
tons of
his
armies,
target.
and so I was like, well, I'm gonna pick guys that we don't have, and we didn't have Necrons. People are like, oh, painting competition, you're gonna do Necrons.
He just
So
stared
there's like
at the
easy
barrel.
mode because you just spray paint them silver. I'm like, well, fine, I'll show you. I'll do them. I'll make them yellow. Like, because I was an idiot. So that's how I ended up with these guys, with this scheme. I like it because like these guys, like it's kind of a ceramic looking kind of deal. What is it? Neck arc, neck feety, neck riff of the gold dudes. Nefric, is that right? Something like that.
Or Nylak.
No. But anyway, so there's like the rich. There's like a golden army. And part of my thought for these guys is that they're just yellow. They're not gold because they're not the rich part of the army.
Its fingers clanked on the metal as it returned the head to
thing.
its neck.
Um,
With a sharp click, and its sunken eyes
Neferic?
blazed green once
Nefric.
Nefric bounced off the reanimated
Yeah,
monster
okay.
as the guard opened fire at point blank range.
But like these guys are all poor and flare virused, so they're not the noble rich dudes.
Headed back underground, but the guardswoman was right. He needed to get off Targian. He needed to escape. Those things weren't going to stop until everyone was dead and gone. The landing bay was in turmoil, starships already blasting off. Everywhere he looked, he could see enterprising captains offering safe passage from Targian, for the right price, of course. Talon snorted. Even now, when the world was falling around their ears, people were trying to make money. There was only one snag. He hadn't an Imperial credit to his name. Ahead of him, an old man struggled towards a large void ship. It was Hinkins, the toolsmith, lugging a heavy box. The oldling tripped and fell, tools spilling everywhere. Swinging Splitter onto his back, Talon ran over to help. "Leave that alone," Hinkins snapped as Talon grabbed a power hammer from the ground. "I can help," he insisted, dropping the hammer back into the old man's box. "Just take me with you, please." Hinkins looked into Talon's eyes, then down to the Runak patch on his jacket. "I'm not with them anymore," Talon said, his decision made. "I just want to get away." "You and everyone else?" The old man hesitated, shoving the Ganger's arms. "I'm leaving on the Mercator," he said, nodding towards the void ship. "You can come if you carry my tools." "Thank you," Talon said, as Hinkins hobbled on. "I won't let you down." "You better not," the toolsmith said. "Come on, shake your leg. From what I hear about her, Captain Clennon won't wait for long." Chapter 7. Escape. "Going down!" Zelia screamed as the skimmer's engine finally died. The hover sled plunged into a nosedive and carved a path through the scarabs that had crawled up the walls of the hive to scurry into the spaceport. "Out!" Elise barked as the Necron scavengers overran the downed skimmer. Zelia threw herself from the doomed hover sled and had to dodge the las beams of guardsmen trying to blast as many of the metallic beetles as they could. "Are you all right?" Elise asked as the soldiers herded them towards the landing bays. Zelia nodded, catching her breath. "Just need to work on my landings." "We're never going to make it to the Scriptor," Erasmus said, still clutching his satchel. The Lex mechanic had a point. Zelia had never seen such turmoil. People were trampling over each other to get to the ships, their cries drowned out by the engines of dozens of star cruisers trying to take off at once. Above them, two shuttles collided in mid-air, crashing back to the ground as would-be evacuees jumped out of the way of the burning wrecks. Elise grabbed Zelia's hand and dragged her through the crowd, Meki and Erasmus following close behind. No one was looking where they were going. Zelia lost grip of her mum's hand and was about to shout after her when screams broke out on the other side of the spaceport. As one of the heaving mass of people turned and ran. A short, stubby man with bare, hairy feet barged into
enough
Zelia,
of this
knocking her
plastic
to the
scrap,
floor.
I have enough
She
to
screamed, curling into a
base a
ball to
miniature.
stop herself being crushed.
Nice.
Hands grabbed her, pulling her up. It was Meki, his remaining servo sprite buzzing above the stampeding crowd. "Why are people running?" she asked, and then heard the telltale sound of crackling lightning.
Crackling
She twisted
lightning.
around to see a line of Necrons advancing on the dock. The last remnants of the Imperial Guard were moving to intercept, but their las rifles were no match for the Necrons' cannons. Zelia ducked as a shuttle took off right over her, its boarding ramp only narrowly missing her head. Every ship in the spaceport was fleeing. Most made it, but others were struck by Necron energy and sent spinning back to the ground. Others didn't even manage to take off, their hulls dismantled by Necron scarabs before their rockets could fire. "Mum!" Zelia yelled, looking around. "Where are you?" "Zelia!" came the reply, as Elise was swept away by the crowd. There was no way they could get to her. "Erasmus!" Elise shouted, barely able to make herself heard. "Get the kids onto a ship. Any ship. Just get them away from here." "What about you?" Zelia yelled back. "I'll get to the Scriptor and..." The rest of her sentence was lost in the clamour of the dock. Zelia pushed against the crowd, but Elise was nowhere to be seen. "Mum! Mum!" Erasmus grabbed her arm and bundled her forward. Wait! What are you doing? We can't leave her! The Lex mechanic looked her straight in the eye. Your mum will be fine. She's a survivor, but she's right. We'll never make it to the Scriptor. Then where shall we go? Becky asked. Erasmus pointed to a large void ship that was preparing to depart. The Mercator. I know her captain. She'll let us on board. Are you sure? Zelia asked. Erasmus tapped the leather purse. If she doesn't, I have enough credits to persuade her. Let's go. That was easier said than done, as they fought against the tide of spacefarers, all desperate to make their own escape. The servo sprite led the way, flying high above the heads of the crowd, but by the time they reached the Mercator, its cargo doors were closing. Quick, get on! Erasmus yelled, propelling Zelia and Meki through the closing doors. The void ship rose into the air, and Erasmus leapt, hanging from the bottom of the hatch. He dangled in the air as the Mercator swept out of the spaceport. Zelia and Meki grabbed his arms and pulled him aboard with seconds to spare. The cargo doors slid shut, all three of them tumbling to the deck. Thank you, he wheezed, trying to get up as the ship was struck by Necron lightning. He tumbled back to the floor, clutching his satchel to his chest. The Mercator
That guy really likes his satchel.
seemingly unscathed. Zelia helped
I have a feeling it's gonna be
I need to see if Mum took off.
an important
That's about the
thing.
captain, Erasmus said, leading them through the crowd. Perhaps she'll be able to contact the Scriptor. They found a stairwell and climbed up to an observation deck. Like the cargo bay, the place was packed, a throng of warm, sticky bodies pressing in from all sides. Zelia pushed forward, sharp elbows jabbing into her as everyone competed for too little space. She didn't know what was more deafening, the relentless bellow of the engines or the frantic jabbering of the frightened refugees. They hadn't even left Targian's atmosphere and the arguments were breaking out. The survivors quarreled, jealously guarding what few possessions they'd managed to bring with them, glaring at each other with suspicion. And then there was the smell. The place reeked. The stifling temperature on the observation deck was taking its toll. You could almost taste the sweat in the air, stale and bitter.
Satchel.
Zelia, look. Erasmus pointed towards a large viewport at the far end of the deck. Outside, Ral Rata was collapsing in on itself, the giant hive tumbling to the ground. A huge cloud of dust billowed up after the Mercator as it rocketed away from the surface. All at once, Targian's rust-coloured sky gave way to inky blackness. They were in space. They had got away. Zelia kept pushing forwards, wanting to see if she could spot the Scriptor. The ship jolted, and she staggered, Meki catching her before she could fall. That's when she saw the boy, bunched up on the floor by the viewport. It was the ganger who had saved her from a beating on the Scriptor. His eyes were wide as he walked back and forth, arms locked around his knees. Fighting her way through to him, Zelia reached out her hand to touch his shoulder. Hello? He jumped, glancing up at her in terror. Get away! I wouldn't bother with him, said a nearby old-timer sorting tools in a large box. He said he was going to help, but he's been a gibbering wreck ever since we took off. So loud, the boy whined, his voice more like a frightened child than a streetwise ganger. Zelia glanced down and saw Splitter lying by his feet. What had happened to its original owner? Zelia, we need to find Captain Clennon, Erasmus reminded her. But Zelia ignored him. The boy had helped her. Now it was her turn to return the favour. Have you ever been on a starship before? The boy shook his head. Never even been off the ground. She rested a hand on his arm. The muscles beneath his skin were taut. It's all right to be scared. He batted her hand away. No, it's not. If you're scared, you're nothing. If you're scared, you're... The ship swayed and he cried out, grabbing her, pulling her close. This was more hell than she'd been prepared to give, but she went with it, trying to push him away as gently as possible. He was muttering beneath his breath, Mikey, stop, Mikey, stop. It's fine, she said quietly. Really it is. Remind me, what's your name?
I'm not sure if I'm getting through
Talon, he stammered.
a complete fig with the amount of paint that I'm pulling off
Pleased to meet you, Talon Stormweaver.
each
Meki said
time.
politely. Zelia smiled. These are my friends, Meki and Erasmus.
Feels
How
like
do you
about
know each
one.
other? Erasmus asked.
One
Talon
serving
saved me
of
when
paint.
the gangers broke into the ship. She turned back to Talon, who had jumped to his feet. You said we were safe, the boy babbled. We are now, she promised. And what are those? She looked where he was pointing and frowned. The Mercator wasn't alone. At least a dozen ships were flying in a loose formation alongside them. Some were Imperial Navy, although most were civilian. However, that wasn't what Talon was looking at. A flotilla of smaller ships was zooming up from the planet's surface, sleek and powerful, with scythe-like wings glinting in the starlight. The same ships that had attacked the Hive. It's the Necrons, she gasped. Talon looked at her in confusion. Is that what they're called? The aliens? She nodded. We saw them out in the wastelands, but Space Marines were fighting them. I thought they would win. Then you thought wrong. Look! Behind the Necron ships, giant cracks appeared across the surface of Targia. The continents crumbled, light bursting from the ravaged crust. Zelia shielded her eyes as the planet ripped itself apart, exploding into emerald starfire.
Why? But why?
Chapter 8. Warp Space.
Oh, that kid thought he had it bad a second
The ship
ago.
shook as planetary debris buffeted the hull, striking hard against the armor glass viewport. Zelia lurched into Talon, who grabbed her arms to stop her tumbling to the floor. Did they do that? The entire planet, Erasmus whispered. Gone. The Necron ships kept coming, chasing down the evacuees. Energy lanced from beneath their wings, and a battered freighter at the rear of the escaping convoy burst into flames. The Necrons didn't even stop, screeching through the wreckage to find another target. The refugees pressed against the viewports as the Necrons tore through one ship after another. How long before those crackling guns turned on the Mercator? Hey, what are you doing with that? It was the old man shouting at Meki. The Martian boy had a Vox unit in his hands and was probing the device with the haptic implants on his fingers. Give it back, the toolsmith demanded, only to find himself having to fight off an angry servo sprite. It's mine! Here, said Erasmus, shoving a handful of copper coins into the toolsmith's hands. We'll buy it from you, is that enough? It'll do, the old man grumbled, counting credits in his palm. The Martian boy thrust the Vox into Zelia's hand. She looked at Meki in confusion before she heard a familiar voice issuing from the speaker. Zelia? Zelia, can you hear me? Mum, are you all right? Elise's voice was distorted by static.
Almost done.
Can't hear you. The signal faded.
With one
Meki reached
pass
the dial of the
across the whole army.
signal back, faint but recognizable. On the scriptor, managed to take off before the planet exploded. If I can't find you, meet at Emperor's Seat. Do you hear me, Zelia? Emperor's Seat. A cry went up. Zelia turned to see a Necron ship right behind them, larger than the rest. Cannons bristled along its wings, their barrels throbbing with the energy that would rip into them.
Oh, I forgot about that. Have they? He hasn't shown up.
I don't know
Wait,
what you mean. What's the Emperor's Seat? The Necron warship.
is this the first book or the second book?
The refugees racing from the viewports as if they could.
Because I feel like I remember hearing the
Heavy shutter slammed down
orangutan dude.
the view of the attacking ship.
This must be the second book.
Stomach flip.
No, second book. This is the first book.
Only mean one thing. What's going on?
No, it's the
Talon
second book.
cried out, looking around in alarm. We've gone into warp
I don't
space.
remember. But yeah, I remember.
Her guts to stop churning. I don't know
Flea
what that
Pit,
means,
right?
Talon admitted. It's a shortcut through another dimension, Erasmus explained. Another dimension that allows you to cross vast distances in a fraction of the time, yes, said Erasmus. The void ship shuddered. Some journeys are more turbulent than others. What's with the shutters? Talon said, pressing his hand against the armor glass. Why can't we see outside? To look upon the warp is to go mad, Meki intoned in his soft, monotonous voice. What's that supposed to mean? It means that some things are best left a mystery, Zelia told him. I've no idea what warp space looks like, but if you believe the stories, it's a living nightmare. Talon gripped his stomach and leaned against the wall. I don't feel well. Just hope it isn't warp sickness, snorted the old toolsmith, still glaring at them.
Wait, but there was a Necron in the first
Talon asked,
book with Flea Pit.
his brow. Your head
I'm
turns inside
confused.
out,
Unless...
told him, and your body becomes a puddle on the floor. Necky! Celia scolded him.
right. Yeah.
They're just stories.
I
Celia
forgot.
told him. I've travelled all over the Imperium, and I've never heard of anyone becoming a puddle. Doesn't mean the stories aren't true, sneered the toolsmith. How come you've travelled? Talon asked, turning his back on the old man. We are archaeotechs, Erasmus told him. We travel from place to place, digging up the past. Why? The question seemed to flummox the Lex mechanic. Why? To learn, of course, to understand. Talon looked as if the very idea were as alien as the Necrons. And that was your mum, on the Vox? Zelia nodded, looking mournfully at the communicator. Can't you get her back? Not while we're in the warp. The ship juddered and then bucked violently, the shutters sliding up to reveal a very different starfield. We're not, Erasmus observed. Not anymore.
Yeah. Maybe I don't even know. Do I? I don't even know which one this was. I just saw that it was available and I grabbed it.
Inserted a haptic implant. We were thrown back into the material. Talon looked like he was about to punch someone in frustration. The what? Don't any of you speak normally?
I think I should
We've
put it in the
dropped
fridge.
back
It's
into
cold.
real space,
That's
Celia said, checking the Vox. It happens, but it's never good. We're just lucky that the ship is still in one piece. And that we've escaped the Necrons, Erasmus added. How do you know? Can't they warp out, or whatever you call it? Celia shrugged. To be honest, I don't know. I think only humans use warp space. You think? I thought you were the one who travelled from one end of the galaxy to the other. Erasmus cut in. Even if that were possible, which it isn't, by the way, there's much about aliens that we just don't know. Not yet, anyway. Until you dig something out of the ground. The Lex mechanic beamed at the ganger, as if Talon were his favourite pupil. Exactly. Until then, the Emperor will protect us. Yeah, Talon sighed sarcastically, because he's doing such a great job so far. Shh, Mickey hissed. Someone will hear. So, the Martian looked appalled. To speak against the Emperor is heresy.
Yeah, this one. Maybe that's what I did is like maybe there's a sample chapter that I heard or read later that's actually coming up in this book then. Because yeah, it started off where it's sort of origin stories for these two characters at least from the cover. Like the Navigator kid hasn't shown up, and this is just the Ganger kid and the rogue trader or whatever. And yeah, they started on that planet that got attacked by the Necrons.
One of these warriors, then. What? You needed to watch your back. Past tense. You've left them behind. Talon opened up his arms as if to show Erasmus the crowded deck for the first time. I don't see them here, do you? Scowling, he bent down and snatched up the spudjacker. Zelia wasn't really listening to the conversation. Instead, she was pressing buttons on the box. The unit was more than a communicator.
Alrighty.
It seemed to also have data slate capabilities, although all she wanted to do was re-establish a link to her mum.
1, 2, 3, 4,
Servo
5.
sprite fussed around her
1,
head, and Celia
2,
swatted
3,
it.
4,
No one wants to help.
5. 1, 2,
Here,
3,
let me.
4,
He took the Vox
5.
and started pressing buttons.
What the heck? Oh, it's just
Celia
15.
turned to the viewport and pulled open her omniscope to search the stars.
Eh.
The captain would soon plunge the void ship back into warp space.
1.
Maybe after she had made contact with the rest of the evacuation fleet. But where was the scriptor?
3.
Where was her mum?
4,
The
5.
scope beeped as it locked on to something small in the midst of the pitch-black void. The cogitator automatically zoomed in, but Zelia still couldn't make out what it was.
Ugh.
Blips appeared on the heads-up display. Cold dread crept into the pit of her stomach.